November is Indigenous Heritage Month in the US, so let's talk about some books that I'm excited about. Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alex, and today we're talking about Indigenous Heritage Month and books by Indigenous authors. So if you joined me in any of the Spooktober episodes, I mentioned a couple times that there would be a post for Indigenous Heritage Month, and here it is. Typically, I love recommending books to you guys. Unfortunately, I did not get that many Indigenous books that made it into my final lineup this year. And that's just like all on me. I didn't prioritize. I did diversify my bookshelf a lot this year, but Indigenous books kind of just like slipped under my radar a little bit, which I'm very sad to say. So instead of me telling you about my favorite Indigenous books, which I've already talked about that last year if you want to go check out that post, today I'm going to talk to you about books that are on my Indigenous TBR that I am just super excited about reading. So maybe you can find a book on the list that is also exciting to you and you will read it as well. Before we get into it, make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know what I'm posting. I post every week, and all we do on this channel is talk about books. So if you like listening to people talk about books, here I am every week doing just that for you. I feel like it's important to say this, like every time we're talking about specific books, or especially like representation in books, please diversify your bookshelf all year. I think it's great when we get to certain months that pertain to certain demographics, like Indigenous Heritage Month or Black History Month, or Pride Month. It's always like really nice to read books that kind of reflect authors from that viewpoint, but you don't have to restrict yourself to only reading during these specific months. Like, diversify your bookshelf all year. I promise you there's so many good books out there by BIPOC POC authors, by authors of the LGBTQ plus community. Like, they just don't get talked about enough. They just don't get the recognition that they deserve. And I feel like the only way that these books get to come into the limelight and get the recognition that they deserve starts with us just having a conversation about it. So let's have a conversation about it today. So yeah, like I said, these are some books that have been on my TBR that I'm really excited about reading. It doesn't mean I'm going to get to them this month, but these are books that I just am really interested in, authors that I'm really interested in, and yeah, maybe you'll find something on the list that also you're interested in and you want to read. So let's not waste any more time, let's get into it. The first book on my list is There by Tommy Orange. Okay, like this cover is just giving everything to me. I don't know why. It's such a simple cover, but I absolutely love it. So this has been on my TBR for like 2 years. One of the reasons I haven't read it is because it's always out at my library, which means that it's probably a pretty good book. But the reason I'm interested in it is Tommy Orange, the author of this book, is actually like enrolled in the tribes in Oklahoma. I grew up in that area where he's enlisted in, but he doesn't live in Oklahoma and he didn't grow up in Oklahoma. He grew up in California, and that's where he continues to reside. And so a lot of his books are written about kids that are Indigenous that live in California. And so I'm really interested for this perspective of, he's enlisted in a tribe that he doesn't actually live in the area of. This actually happens a lot more often than you think with Indigenous tribes if you do some research and you do some reading and you talk to people. It's not as weird as it sounds, but I'm interested to see the cultural differences on the page here. Not that I'm an expert, but anyway, it drew my interest anyway. So There is kind of a story of people going to a powwow in California. Now I can't remember where, but it's like 12 different people's stories of them all like coming together. 12 different people that don't know each other, but whose lives kind of intersect at this get together that they're going to. It sounds really interesting, and like I said, Tommy Orange in general just interests me. So he's written a few books. This is the most popular one, so it's always just been on my list. The next book I'm going to talk about is Son of a Trickster by Edin Robinson. This is another one where the cover just absolutely got me. This cover is fantastic. I don't really understand what this story is supposed to be about, honestly, because I read the description for it and I was kind of confused. But it does sound like a YA coming of age novel about a boy named Jared. And I think this is First Nations, which would be Canada. I could be wrong though. But it talks a lot about like his growing up and how he's dependent on a lot in his household, but he's not really old enough to take care of his household, and a lot of things like that. This does have quite a few triggers in it, so that also interests me. But yeah, I don't really know what to make of the description for this, except for that it does sound like a YA coming of age novel of a young Indigenous boy that is struggling a lot at home and struggling within his culture and just struggling within himself coming of age. So sounds really interesting. Edin Robinson is another one that's just on the list, but again, this cover just really got me. So the next book I'm going to talk about is Love After the End, which is an anthology. And this is kind of the sequel to Love Beyond Body, Space, and Time, which I did read earlier this year. So it's a collection of short stories that has returning characters. Some returning characters from the first book, Love Beyond Body, Space, and Time. So this is an LGBTQ, Two-Spirit, Indigenous collection of short stories. Like I said, I read the first one earlier this year. I absolutely loved it. Like, short stories are not really my thing unless they're written really well. And this collection of short stories was written exceptionally well. It was a collection of some really famous Indigenous authors, while also some not so famous ones that have just beautiful storytelling and kind of opened my eyes to all the possibilities of authors that are out there waiting for their stuff to get noticed. A few people I know for sure in this book is Darcy Little Badger, who I feel like everybody kind of knows who that is. Very famous, not just in the Indigenous publishing world, but just in general. And then Joshua Whitehead, who I absolutely love. I love Joshua Whitehead. I read their book a few years ago, Johnny Appleseed. Absolutely love that book. Absolutely love that book. And I'm just patiently waiting for Joshua Whitehead to publish anything else. They do a lot of collaborative pieces like this and like Love Beyond Body, Space, and Time. So I do try to get more of the collaborative pieces sometimes just so I can read some more of Joshua Whitehead stuff. But there is a lot of other Indigenous authors in this anthology. So yeah, anthologies are usually pretty easy to read because it's just a collection of short stories. But if you're interested in like Two-Spirit LGBTQ Indigenous stories, this is probably going to be really good if it's anywhere close to what Love Beyond Body, Space, and Time was. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Future Home of the Living God by Louise Erdrich. Okay, so Louise Erdrich wrote The Roundhouse. Oh my god, I love that book. I love that book. Like, it just had this ease to it, but it also was just like heavy trauma, which, you know, I love trauma books. So this one really hit a lot of high notes for me. So I'm expecting great things from this book just because I love Louise Erdrich's writing. She is also kind of like the bread and butter of Indigenous authors. Like, everyone knows who Louise Erdrich is. She's extremely talented. She's very accomplished, and she's very awarded writer as well. I feel like if you read any kind of Indigenous fiction, you know who Louise Erdrich is. If you don't, Louise Erdrich is a great place to start because she has a lot of work out there and she just has this beautiful way of storytelling. This one ended up on my list. Like, basically I could read any Louise Erdrich book and probably be pretty happy, but this one ended up on my list because it's actually a dystopian novel, which really piqued my interest. And it's about a Indigenous woman that was adopted by a non-Indigenous family, and when she becomes pregnant, she has an urge to find her birth mother and to kind of reconnect with her culture. But at the same time that she's doing this, we're in this dystopian setting where a lot of these things just aren't possible anymore. So I'm interested to see what she did with this book, because just at first glance it sounds super interesting. And then this dystopian edge to it kind of like, it interests me. Really big intrigue for this book. So I really hope I can read this one, if not soon, in 24, because yeah, this one just, I'm really intrigued. And like I said, I know Louise Erdrich is a great writer and I've read some of her stuff before and really liked it. The next book on my Indigenous TBR list is Lightfinder by Paquette. I think that's how you say the last name. Paquette? Don't know much about this book, honestly, because the synopsis was a little confusing, but there were some keynotes in the description and in the review section that immediately made me want to read it, and that is Cree mythology. So, I don't know why, but every book I read that has Cree mythology in it, I absolutely love. This specific indigenous tribe or of people have just a huge amount of history and just beautiful stories to tell. I don't know. If you have any kind of preference to indigenous writers or anything, mine would definitely be Cree writing because they just have so many amazing stories. I don't know if I just don't read enough of other indigenous people's stories, but I'm really attracted to Cree mythology, and so this one really hit some high notes in the review section for me. Also, it does sound kind of like a coming-of-age novel, which could be interesting. Anyway, Cree mythology really had me sold, and I also really love the cover. So yeah, that's all I needed to know, really. The next book on my list is Indian Horse by Richard Wagamese. Okay, so Richard Wagamese is another one of those writers that is just insanely well known. He has a ton of books. He's up there with Louise Erdrich. Like, everyone knows who Richard Wagamese is if you read any kind of indigenous fiction. So, I've not read any of his books. This could literally be any of his books, okay? But Indian Horse is one of those ones that just kept popping up for me. But literally, I have like 5 or 6 of his novels on my TBR, so I just picked one to put up for you today. The reason I haven't read any of his books, they're very trauma-filled. They're very trauma-filled and sad. But I know a lot of people who study indigenous heritage, history, etc. read a lot of his books because they are very historically based. So if you're interested in anything historically, I think this is First Nations as well. I could be wrong. I think he is First Nations though, and so typically a lot of his books are set in the past of when these are set back in the time of residential schools, and so a lot of them are residential school type stories, which are incredibly sad. Or they're about residential school survivors, which I think this book is. I think this is in the 60s, and this is after I think the main character in this book like had just come out of the residential schools and was going home, something like that. Yeah, so if you can handle heavier topics on indigenous history, I think Richard Wagamese is a really great choice. He has a ton of books out too, and he's a very awarded author as well. I don't think you could go wrong reading any of his stuff. So he's forever on my list, just like Louise Erdrich. They just have so many titles out there that you could literally just pick any and probably be pretty happy and get like a really nice dose of beautiful writing and cultural historical lessons. I'm totally going to botch this name, but I am going to try my very best. This book is called This is Paradise by Kristiana, Kahakauwila. I'm sure I've done it wrong. If you know how to pronounce it, please correct me. I'm always open for corrections. This is set in Hawaii, and this opens the door for Indigenous Pacific Islanders, which is a subgenre of Indigenous literature that I think gets so easily overlooked. People always tend to forget about Hawaii and Indigenous peoples of Hawaii, especially now when everything with Hawaii is happening and a lot more people are starting to speak out. But Hawaii has been, and the Indigenous peoples of Hawaii have been trying to get the people's attention of, you know, the contiguous United States for a very long time. Like, the Indigenous peoples and just local peoples of Hawaii have been struggling for just a massive amount of years, and everyone's just kind of looked away and not paid attention. When I saw this, number one, I felt insanely ashamed of myself that I had not looked into Indigenous Pacific Islanders authors in general, but I thought this is a great opportunity to acknowledge them and recommend a book. No, I haven't read it. It's very highly reviewed, but this is something that I feel like I have to read, and I'm really attracted to this story. I'm really interested in reading more about this specific subgenre of Indigenous writers, Indigenous peoples. Like, I think it's really easy to overlook them because unless you live like in Hawaii, in the area, I feel like it's hard for like us, like for me, it's hard for me as an American to like think outside like what is America right now, like the contiguous US. So like Alaska gets overlooked in my mind a lot, and Hawaii gets overlooked, and of course Puerto Rico always gets overlooked in my mind as well. And that's on me. Always. So this is me giving a message to myself that I need to remember to include Indigenous peoples from these areas as well. So this is Paradise. Is about a local Hawaiian woman that is trying to reconnect to her roots. The synopsis was not very descriptive, but the reviews were really good, and she has a lot of other works as well, so if this one's like not for you, you could look into some of her other works, or you can just look into other Indigenous authors that are from the Pacific Islands as well. This is more of a message to me than to anybody else, but maybe you needed the message too, that I should read books by all the Indigenous tribes in the US. I don't know where in the lineup this will go, but hopefully soon. So that's all I have for the TBR. I forgot to mention this in the opening, but I am going to do an honorary mention section, and that's going to be now. And this is just going to be authors that I absolutely love. Tried and true Indigenous authors that I've already read. A lot of their books I've talked about on this channel already, so I won't like bore you with the synopsises of their books or anything because I've talked about them extensively. But yes, this is some honorable mentions. And we're going to start with Stephen Graham Jones. I've talked about Stephen Graham Jones a lot on my channel. Just go peruse around and you will find plenty about Stephen Graham Jones on my channel. If you like Indigenous folklore horror, Stephen Graham Jones is probably the best. I'll flip through some of his books here that I've read and some that I'm excited about, but yes. And if you like gore, if you like Indigenous folklore horror, Stephen Graham Jones is your man. My next honorable mention is going to be Cherie Dimaline. She wrote The Marrow Thieves, and it's a duology, I believe. I absolutely love this series. I haven't finished it, so I read The Marrow Thieves, which is the first book, and then Hunting by Stars by Cherie Dimaline. It's been in my TBR for practically ever, and I just haven't gone to it this year. But the storytelling is amazing. This book is set in like a dystopian future. Just really great stuff. Last one on my honorable mentions is Michelle Good. She wrote Five Little Indians. I absolutely love this story. Oh my gosh. This book was beautiful. This book was beautiful. If you're going to read anybody, like, I highly recommend Michelle Good. Like, the way that she put this story together was just breathtaking, and I really want to read more of her books. But I don't know. She did this book to perfection. I absolutely loved it. Okay, so that's all I have for you guys today. I'm going to try and get better about what time I film because the sun right now is just not it. It's harder this time of year because the time has changed and I haven't like fully adjusted to the time change, and that means that like my lighting is different even though I'm like filming at the same time. Whatever, you guys get it. Make sure you hit all the buttons down below so you know when I'm posting. I post every week. I hope you guys found something interesting to read today. I hope that you're invigorated to diversify your bookshelf more often. I hope that you're encouraged to diversify your shelf more often. I know I need to. I focused a lot on LGBTQ books and POC books this year. I didn't get as much Indigenous rep books in my lineup just in general throughout the year as I wanted to. Yeah, and that's my fault. And I didn't realize it till we got to here, and I was like, oh my gosh, I just haven't read as much as I wanted to read, and I just haven't. So I need to make a bigger effort. All of these books are on my TBR. All of these are, and more. I have more Indigenous books on my TBR. I just didn't list them today. These are the ones that I'm the most interested in and I'm the most excited about. And of course, I have my honorable mentions. Also, look in the cards for other videos to watch that talk about Indigenous books. Yeah, and I hope that you're inspired to read more Indigenous fiction novels. Yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you have a good one, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!